All right, welcome back to the Pair Program. I am your host, Tim Winkler, joined as always by my co-host, Mike Gruen. Mike, today is National Superhero Day. So got me thinking that if you could have any superpower, not the character, just one ability, what would you go with?
I'm in the superpower time travel every time. That's the best superpower in my opinion.
Time travel.
Probably the most dangerous, but yeah, time travel would be my
I'm
choice. What about you?
Going teleporting, I think.
Teleporting?
No more airports, sitting in DC traffic. Just, pick your destination, bam, you're there.
Nice.
Cool. All right. Well, look, speaking of, larger than life capabilities, today's episode ties into some real world heroes, innovators that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in space technology. So we're going to be talking about STRATFI, SpaceWERX, and how partnerships like the one between Albedo and the U.S. Space Force are helping to bridge the commercial innovation into national defense. So we're bringing together two excellent guests for this one. First off, we have Arthur Grijalva. I hope I pronounced that last name okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Director of SpaceWERX, leads strategy across nearly $500 million in funding annually to accelerate innovation within the United States Space Force. Arthur, thanks for joining us on the pod.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I love talking about SpaceWERX and how we can make the future of space better.
Good stuff. Yeah, looking forward to diving in deeper. And then we have Topher Haddad, the co-founder and CEO of Albedo, a startup building VLEO satellites, also known as very low Earth orbiting satellites that capture optical imagery at super sharp resolutions. Also, we'll note that Topher is a Pair Program alum who previously joined us on an episode we hosted a few years ago. Alongside Mike Brown. So Topher, thanks for joining us a second time here.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Good stuff. All right, let's get right into the Pair Me Up segment here. Here's what we'll go around the room, name two things that just kind of go together or don't. Mike, you always lead us off. What do you got for us today?
Today, well, it's springtime and that home ownership in critters. It seems like every season, there's something that you're battling, whether it's ants in the spring or mice or something, or squirrels in the fall. What made me think of it is this weekend, there's a bird that's decided that my gutters would make a great nest. So just trying to deal with that. Home ownership in critters. It's just like a never ending saga.
Yeah, I can relate, man. We've got some wild critters out here at this Tennessee home. Pretty sure there's something in our floorboards that we're real time trying to navigate. But
that's awesome.
Yeah,
fun quick story on that. My son, growing up, he said there was like a monster in his room or whatever, and my wife and I just didn't believe him, and we're like, it's typical imagination stuff. Just go back to sleep. It turned out there were squirrels, not squirrels. There was a couple mice up in the attic right above his bed. And that's what he was hearing. And so lesson learned. Maybe we should investigate that.
That'll keep you up at night.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure we're dealing with the squirrel issue, but we'll figure that out soon. Yep. Cool. I'm going to keep my pairing in theme with, a little bit more about what we're kind of talking about today in space. So I'm going to go with kind of staring up at the stars and feeling incredibly small. These are things that I've experienced multiple times. One really standout experience out in Moab in the desert, where stars are so brilliant. But I would say that when you kind of get that moment where you're looking up, and it's humbling, honestly, when you're kind of caught up in the stress of deadlines, meetings, and everyday life, but you kind of look up at the night sky, and I think it kind of resets everything for you. Just kind of reminds you that there's a bigger picture beyond our daily grind. So I'll go with staring at stars and feeling incredibly small. Nice. And then I'm going to pass it over to our guest, Topher. Quick intro and your pairing, and you can opt out of the Topo Chico repeat, even though I could see that you are drinking one today.
Do have my Topo from last time, and every day got it right here. Topher Haddad, co-founder CEO of Albedo. My pairing is Inspired by my recent morning routine, which is going to the skate park bright and early in the morning, fully padded up. It's empty. Maybe there's one other person there with pads like me, trying to escape the crowds, and listening to the TBPN Technology Brothers podcasts from the day before.
Oh,
so
sick.
that's been my morning routine, and it makes for a great start to the day.
Dude, I love that you brought that up because I was revisiting our last episode just to make sure I didn't ask some of the same questions. And one of them was, what's a skill that you're a hobby that you're kind of working towards, and skateboarding was your call out.
Did I mention that?
You did, yeah. So have you been progressively getting better over the last couple of years?
Not as quickly as I would have liked. I was a late. I learned to skateboard in my 20s, so I didn't get that like early days technique down. But yeah, I think I've been improving a bit. So,
what's the best trick that you got in the bag?
I mostly ride the bulls, and so I've been working on getting back to like the stalls and rock the fakies and things like that. But right now I'm trying to get the grind out of the bowl. And then going back in. So that's been what I've been working on lately, which is tough.
I dig it. Good stuff, man. Well, good for you for keeping at it. Cool. And we'll pass it over to Arthur, just a quick intro and your pairing.
Yeah. Hey, so it's Arthur Grijalva here at SpaceWERX. My pairing are the two passions that keep me going, which is coffee and Disney. So I actually have coffee and Disney right here in a cool little tumbler. And being here in SoCal, I get to go Disneyland quite a bit. So I actually had a season pass last year, went 20 times. So that keeps me up and running.
Is it everybody I talk to that goes to Disney is always like you have to get like the lightning pass or like the cut the line pass? Is that part of your package?
No, since we go so many times, we usually wait in line. We try to time it with the day, but sometimes we'll do the lightning pass. Got it.
You've already checked all the rides off the list. Yeah. Cool. All right, man. Well, yeah, thanks again for joining us, and Topher for the repeat. Good pairings all around. Let's dive into today's conversation. So in classic, pair program form, this will be a dual perspective conversation on the SpaceWERX STRATFI program, how it enables emerging commercial technologies like Albedo's VLEO satellites to accelerate their path towards operational defense use. Arthur, you'll be bringing in the government lens from SpaceWERX. Topher, you're going to bring that founder's perspective in from Albedo and how a startup navigates the STRATFI program. So I'm excited for this one, guys. Let's dive in. I'd like to start with you, Arthur, and maybe for listeners that are unfamiliar with STRATFI, what is the program, its purpose, and how does it align with the broader mission of SpaceWERX?
No, awesome. Thanks. So here at SpaceWERX, the way I look at it is, how do we build a more efficient, effective, and lethal force for the Space Force? And I really think that's by taking advantage of our biggest strength as a nation, which is innovation and ingenuity. And that comes from companies, small startups, academia. So really here at SpaceWERX, we work with those great ideas that come out of the community. We make investments into those ideas, and we take the best and brightest ones and really take advantage of what's going on in the commercial market. And ultimately, we want to transition them into the hands of the warfighter. So we do that in many ways. That could be as small as a study, maybe like $100,000 just to kind of look at a concept, all the way up to this thing that we're talking about, which is a STRATFI, which is a strategic funding increase. And really, I see that as a partnership between SpaceWERX, other government program offices, and companies and private capital. So traditionally, it's $15 million comes from SpaceWERX, $15 million comes from program offices, then $30 million comes from the private capital side. So it really shows how we're all coming together. We're highlighting a company, an idea. We really think that there's a lot there that we could ultimately transition and get to the commercial market and to the hands of the warfighter. And that's really our biggest effort here at SpaceWERX. So just to give one example, K2 Space is one of our companies. They had a STRATFI back in 24. They are launching in the next year a mega satellite space vehicle. It's going to be going into low orbit, and then it's going to be transitioning up into medium Earth orbit. And what's really great about that company is they went from idea to STRATFI and into a program of record like a resilient GPS, all within 2 years. So that's really great, and it shows how fast we can go and how we're ultimately transitioning things into Space Force programs and ultimately into the hands of the warfighter.
Yeah, it's exciting, especially, hearing timelines like that versus, what a lot of folks associate like these 3 to 5 year timelines to get to a program of record. Is there a formula or, I guess I'm just trying to understand a little bit on how SpaceWERX evaluates and maybe prioritizes some of these different STRATFI candidates?
Yeah, for sure. So ultimately, I see the STRATFIs as a reflection of the priorities of the Space Force. So we work with program offices, so the program executive offices. We work with the operational community like U.S. Space Command, U.S. Indo-PACOM. We also work with the Commercial Space Office, the Space Futures Command. So we look at all these different entities, and then we use that and we take those inputs to prioritize which investments we're going to make. But then we also look at things at the company. Can they scale? Are they real? Is there any foreign influence? How commercially viable are they? And we do all that. And then we ultimately take our recommendations up to the highest levels of the Space Force and the leadership side, all the way up to General Purdy, who is the acting service acquisition executive. And then he endorses them to ensure that they're all aligned towards the top priorities for the Space Force.
And are there specific outcomes, or I guess trying to understand just in terms of like how you all measure impact of each of these companies? Are there certain criteria that you kind of put in place when you're evaluating some outcomes or measuring the impact?
No, for sure. I mean, for me, the biggest thing for me is it scalable? Can we make it real? And can it ultimately transition into the hands of the warfighter? That's what matters most to me. So we're really looking for these game-changing technologies and ideas and companies that can really move the ball forward for the Space Force.
Cool. Yeah, let's switch gears real quick and pass it over to you, Topher. So, from the founder seat, can you talk a little bit about what motivated, Albedo to pursue STRATFI?
Yes. I'd say, from there's a lot of different funding mechanisms for early stage companies and innovative technologies across the U.S. government and the defense side of things. STRATFI is especially great because of the matching ability, where it takes venture capital dollars, kind of to Arthur's point on like the sustainability of the business and that sort of thing, with the customer funds from the government, with matching dollars from SpaceWERX and the cyber side of things. And so it basically both makes the sales pitch to the customer easier because you can double their money with the matching funds and get more scope than you otherwise would to fund, a new technology on its own. And similarly for us, it's one of the best sources of non-dilutive funding because of that matching opportunity. And it fits a nice stage in terms of the, not quite for, in our case, as early as the idea phase, like the K2 example that Arthur mentioned, but an initial satellite launch and a technology that is demonstrated, but there's a lot more to go in terms of what we can exploit from VLEO. And that's really what we're focused on in our STRATFI, is the measurements and the data we get from the VLEO environment to inform the U.S. government's, future abilities to put different payloads and whatnot into VLEO. And so from, I'd say, both the technology side of things in terms of the phase of development and the non-dilutive funding opportunity that comes with that, it's a pretty unique combo.
Arthur, I was curious, and Topher, feel free to also answer, but is Space Force, is it a little faster or easier to go through it since Space Force is newer than some of the other things, or is it basically the same, very similar process and similar bureaucracy? I'm sort of curious if you guys have a little bit of advantage in terms of being a little bit newer and not being as tied down to maybe how things have always been done.
No, for sure. We do take advantage of that by making sure that we're going against priorities and helping kind of align it across the Space Force, because we work across the entire Space Force, like Space Systems Command, Space Development Agency, Space Rapid Capabilities Office, the Air Force Research Lab, and then also the operational community. So that does make it, I would say, easier maybe for us. Since we are smaller, we are able to get all those key stakeholders and align that to the demand signal. But from a process perspective, this is really something that's been instituted across the Department of the Air Force, which includes the Air Force and Space Force. And we take advantage of that great scaled operations that comes from AFWERX, which is our parent organization, which includes both the air and space side when it comes to innovation. So because we have that together, they have about $1 billion per year. On the space side, we have about $500 million per year. So in total, it's $1.5 billion that we're putting into this innovation ecosystem. SpaceWERX, we're able to take advantage of all those great processes from AFWERX while also aligning across all the different stakeholders in the space side. So it's made for a pretty good combination, in my opinion.
What's kind of like the cadence on the STRATFI award? So, I guess twofold question, how many companies do you tend to kind of loop in on maybe an annual basis, and are each of those kind of allocated a specific amount? Is it kind of even across the board? What goes into that?
Yeah, so we work with these acquisition or these program executive officers. We look at their portfolios, we work with their teams, and we're like, hey, where do you really need the most help? Where do you have a challenge or somewhere that we can help you? So what they'll do is they'll point us to the part of the portfolio that they think that they could commercialize the most. And then we work with those partners to see how can we fund into those portfolios. So one example I like to give is tactically responsive space. We invested $34 million into that. And we ran it through this challenge program, which is essentially the government gets together with industry and academia and the private capital side. We all get together, usually 100 people, and we talk about the problem. We figure out what's the best way to approach it, how can we, what are the best requirements, and all that goes into solicitation for a contract. And then what happens is we get a lot of inputs from industry. We had 302 submissions for that round, and we selected 17 companies. And then we really got the best and brightest, best of breed. And then we build them into a cohort, and we just kind of take them along, working with the program office and going after the challenges that they need. And ultimately, that feeds into the STRATFI. So we'll start with those smaller contracts of $2 million a pop. That'll go into our tactical funding increases, which is like a smaller STRATFI. And then ultimately into a STRATFI to help with prototyping and transitioning to the program offices. So it really starts from the beginning, working together to ultimately get to the end outcome of trying to transition and actually building these things up and burning down risk for the portfolios. Wow.
So 302 submissions down to 17. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Wow. I love how you bring in those multiple perspectives too, from industry, academia, venture as well. So, Topher, did you have any, and I don't know if it was, you being the main lead or point on, working within the STRATFI program itself. So maybe you have somebody else that would be better suited to answer this, but I was curious, were there any surprises or challenges, when you're kind of navigating that government funding landscape?
Yes, I think so. This was our second attempt. The STRATFI we were awarded was our second application. The last one was maybe about a year before then. And so I'd say the surprise at that time was seemingly the hardest part to get a STRATFI was getting the customer funds, getting a customer to say, yeah, we're willing to throw in $3 million or $5 million or $15 million for this specific scope that we want to fund, and then taking that and it getting matched. But to Arthur's point, at 300 submissions, I think would mean that all those submissions had customers wanting to fund that. And so then it really got back to the priorities of the department in terms of what they wanted to down select with the limited matching funds that they had. And so I think that was a surprise for us in the first time, was like, oh, we had customers that wanted to fund this specific thing, but we didn't get the STRATFI. And that really just mapped back to the overall priorities of the department. But generally, I'd say that It's pretty. I mean, it takes a while to get up to speed on all the different nuance and rules and program offices, especially if you haven't worked in this arena before. But generally, it's all laid out there pretty straightforward in terms of what the requirements are, what you have to do, and what's going to make for a compelling proposal.
Yeah, do you lead that, or do you have like a team that's kind of like more designated towards like the federal side of your all's work?
We have a great director of federal, Dan DiOrlando, and then we have a couple engineers that spend a lot of time on that side of things as well. And then myself, I'm very involved as well. So that's kind of our U.S. government team right now.
Sweet. So I can recall back, it was almost 2 years ago now when you were kind of talking to us about anticipation for your first satellite launch, and you referenced spring of 2025, and so here we are, and your forecast was spot on because you guys launched Clarity 1, I believe, in March of this year. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of walk us through that experience and what went into the just kind of prepping for that successful launch?
Yeah, a lot. And I think that's another element of all this too, is like the technology and the idea and like what you're trying to do as a startup in working with the government is one thing, but executing on that is very meaningful in terms of like doing what you say you're going to do. So that has definitely helped us in terms of hitting that launch on time. And we hit it on budget internally as well, which our investors loved. So a lot of the focus over the last few years has just been building the new technologies required to fly a satellite in VLEO for an extended period of time. Our satellites will last about 5 years on average. And so very, focused on de-risking certain milestones that we could on the ground, doing a lot of testing and really focusing on, the highest risk areas and the new technologies that we developed. And so, it always helps to have a very big forcing function, a very big deadline looming, especially as you get closer and closer. So as we got closer, I mean, the team was definitely putting in a lot of hours and pushing it really hard. But we were super happy to see, especially even in the first few days after launch, how many milestones in the commissioning schedule we hit very quickly that we had thought would take longer. And so just getting to see all the fruits of that hard work and, the smart testing and the smart development cycles across this kind of new type of satellite. Yeah, very, very, very happy with how it went. But it was a big effort across the whole company. It was the biggest priority for years to hit that date.
Yeah, I do love a good tight deadline to just sort of force that. Like, work takes up the amount of time you give it. So if you have a deadline that's pretty tough to move, it's amazing how much can get done and how easy it is to make certain decisions about like what scope to cut or whatever. I'm sure that's a huge benefit for you guys.
Yeah, I like the hype video too. I think I saw it on LinkedIn. It was an exciting video. So what are some of the like next steps, I guess, in terms of like your all's prototyping or mission planning that maybe aligns with the more recent kind of STRATFI funding?
So this first satellite is an operational system in the sense that we've pre-sold a bunch of contracts for it. We have different deadlines and phases that will start delivering product to customers. This part of the STRATFI is leveraging this system that we're flying operationally, but also for the first time in VLEO to share the learning, share the data, all the measurements that we're going to make around atomic oxygen and drag, how that drag changes with solar flares and different kind of autonomous mission operations that are required very uniquely in VLEO. And so that's really the focus of our STRATFI is sharing that data with Air Force Research Laboratory, as they are also a group that has been looking at VLEO as a new domain and a new orbit that has various benefits, both on the mission capability side from like a TAC SRT perspective, getting better resolution, but also from a resiliency perspective of being able to have orbital diversity where, adversaries could, the more redundancy basically that you have across space, across all these different orbits, the better off you are. And for some of the capabilities that VLEO unlocks, that we would call kind of exquisite level capabilities, because of the price point you can build these VLEO systems at, you can also proliferate those exquisite capabilities, which have been two things that have previously been mutually exclusive, as exquisite capabilities and proliferated architectures, which is a huge push right now, given risks from adversaries. And so that's part of what the STRATFI will focus on. beyond that, we will kind of from going forward from here, continue to build satellites for our constellation that will focus on capturing imagery at a resolution that commercially today you can only get from planes or drones. So really giving that value proposition from a satellite of global scale, on-demand imaging, high revisit rates, and so on, as well as developing some new product lines with our expanding production capacity to exploit the VLEO environment for the other benefits that it brings.
Random question, but is all the manufacturing based out in Colorado?
It is, yeah. We have we procure components for areas that like aren't unique to VLEO or have great off the shelf production lines, but a lot of it we build in house. We do all the integration assembly here in Denver. We're actually expanding to a new facility soon to increase that capacity, and then but yeah, most of it we do ourselves, just given it's a new environment with its unique requirements, and there isn't really an existing supply chain for VLEO.
That's awesome, and congrats again on that launch. It's I know it was again, it was 2 years ago, so it was like you kind of manifested it, and here we are. So it's really cool to come full circle with that. Just kind of bringing things back into the STRATFI and dual use pathways. I mean, this is a talking point we bring up quite constantly on this podcast, knowing that we talk a lot with commercial startup founders that are looking to integrate and help modernize in areas of tech and defense and national security. Arthur, what do you think is maybe like the next evolution for STRATFI or some of these dual use pathways? And do you think that there are still like some gaps that you're trying to work through with the whole tech transition process?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I'll highlight is this cultural shift. I think that's really happening right now under General Purdy's leadership for the Space Force. Is how can we really get after all these things that we need for the warfighter, but without substantially increasing the budget, or maybe having the same baseline budget, even less? And really the way to do that is by taking advantage of all the great things that are coming out of the commercial sector and re-looking at legacy systems and seeing, hey, can we change some requirements? Can we change them so we can have more commercial players, maybe take a little bit more risk, and we could bring some of these new startups and companies into this space? And that is something that we're doing right now with a program called GSAP. So GSAP is really, it's in GEO. It does space domain awareness. So basically looks out into the GEO belt and is able to see what other assets are doing, both U.S. assets and also other nations. And that's a really important mission. And right now, instead of maybe traditionally taking many years to build a satellite or hundreds of millions of dollars, we might be able to do it with less funding and a faster amount of time by taking advantage of these STRATFIs. So that's one program that we've been working with amongst many others. But really, from my perspective, is how do we scale that? So we're really looking across the board, across the Space Force, making sure that we can have more of these insertion points into these programs of record so that we can really bring in this game-changing technology in them and be able to do it more effectively, less cost, and really go after that.
That's awesome. Topher, this is, you mentioned the second go at the STRATFI on your all's end. What kind of advice do you lead for startup founders that are looking to create the types of partnerships that you've already kind of done so with SpaceWERX? What are the things that, in hindsight, you would recommend to that founder that's kind of getting their foot off the ground?
I think definitely, like, from when you start the company, getting to a phase 2 SBIR as quickly as you can unlocks a lot of different opportunities, including STRATFI. And so whether that's the traditional route through a phase 1 and then a phase 2, or going direct to phase 2, which is what we did, that should be like the initial focus if you're trying to do work with the Defense Department from starting a company. I think additionally to that, I think the rest of the advice is pretty straightforward and obvious, and like isn't anything novel in the sense that it's like build something that that people want and that someone in the Defense Department wants and needs, And it likely needs to be fairly different and innovative than what they're using today for that to be, really interesting to them. And then finding a champion or a couple champions is so valuable. Like they can just help, sell the company, navigate to the right people in a way that outside the government, you just never can do on your own. And so that has been super helpful for us, and is definitely, should be one of those initial focuses in parallel, maybe with getting that phase 2. And then, I think from there, it's maybe less of like, how do I get the STRATFI, and more like, how do I, build and deliver value to these specific customers. And then in most cases, I think you can leverage STRATFI as a part of that to create leverage for, the scope that they want to fund and doubling their money in that sense.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful advice. Arthur, I'd love to hear it from your angle too, just in terms of, those recommendations to the next wave of founders that are looking to build technologies impacting the mission behind, Space Force. What do you recommend? Any advice or any specific resources that you would direct folks to?
Yeah, so really, one thing I like to highlight is our website, SpaceWERX. So it's space and then WERX .us. So our website's a great resource of all our upcoming events, like the challenge program that I brought up earlier. Right now, we're doing a challenge called Resilient Satcom, and we're having funding tied to that. We're going to have a future one where we look at AI and ML for operations on the space side. So really looking how to make that more efficient. That's will be coming out this fall. And then our STRATFI program will be coming around again this year in the fall. Most likely it'll be opening up in June and closing in August. So that's something to be on the lookout. But really, all those opportunities are there. I think the biggest thing I'd recommend is, hey, it's great to work with the Space Force. SpaceWERX is really here to help. And, we really want to take advantage of all the great stuff that folks are doing now on the commercial side, or maybe with other agencies or even other countries. So I think just all working together for the common good and getting after these game-changing capabilities, that's really what gets me up every morning. And that's what I want to work on with companies.
Cool. I had a follow-up question to, you mentioned at the beginning, Arthur, about sort of commercial viability being an important part of the sort of criteria that you're looking at. And I'm sort of curious when, I can think of probably any number of projects or solutions where maybe that commercial viability might not have been quite as obvious or whatever. Are you guys seeing that, like, is that a tough thing for a lot of these startups to sort of bridge being able to be both commercially viable and building a product that's really also finding that customer fit within the government?
Well, so I had a company once tell me, it's like, it's great when you can loosen the requirements so that we don't have to go too far from a commercial baseline. And that's something that we're trying to help from a military and space perspective. But I mean, these companies are so creative. I was talking to a propulsion company that was telling me like, oh yeah, we built these propulsion tanks. And also we do it for the medical field as well. It could carry oxygen, that you can use for medical supplies, things that I would never, ever think of. Even if I look down the street, I could see, we're really close to Varda space and all the amazing things that they're doing in space with the medical field at zero gravity. These are just things that the government would never understand or know, which is why we really lean heavy on all the great creativeness and just thought leadership from industry. That's really amazing. And like that, like talking to the CEOs, folks like Topher, the energy, the passion, all these like amazing ideas. That's what really gets me excited.
That's interesting.
Good stuff. I guess in closing, you might have touched on it a little bit, Topher, but anything that you want to share with our listeners in terms of what's in store, for Albedo over the next 12 plus months?
So in a few months, we'll get to VLEO. Clarity 1 is still up in LEO, and we will deploy our telescope cover. You can think like a lens cap on a camera once we get below all the other satellites, just for space safety reasons. and we will publish our first slide, our first picture, which will be very exciting. And then, yeah, there will be plenty of imagery coming off of Clarity at that very crisp 10 centimeter resolution that we're excited to share. And then we'll focus, on building more satellites to deploy into that constellation, be able to onboard more customers, many on the commercial side, but as well as on the government side of things. And then, we'll have some new product lines coming out as well in the coming months that are more focused on what the benefits of VLEO and what VLEO can bring to the table across other mission sets. So we're very excited.
Can you just rattle off a couple of use cases on the commercial front that customers would be intrigued with this VLEO technology?
For sure. So for the imagery business and that side of things, today a lot of the commercial sectors to get high resolution imagery will fly planes and drones because they need that very high resolution. One example being, if you look on Google Maps or Apple Maps in cities, it says satellite view, but it's actually captured from planes. And so a big part of our mission is just making Google honest. Just kidding. But
good luck.
But that's one area. A lot of the asset monitoring kind of use cases across like power lines for utilities or pipelines in the oil and gas sector, solar farms. A lot of these residential property insurance, even they all mostly rely on aircraft or even helicopters to get that resolution. And so really any of those cases, there's certain cases where they're flying like super close to a property and building a 3D model at like 1 centimeter resolution that we'll never be able to do from space. But in most cases, matching that resolution, as long as the quality of the characterization of roof shingles or measurements of vegetation clearance around power lines are met, then the value prop of doing it from a satellite platform is pretty obvious. It's a very scalable solution compared to the fragmentation today of taking those approaches. It can be on demand. It's more streamlined as they can just plug into our API. And so if I'd say, if you're listening to this as a potential customer, it's like, is it a pain to go fly planes and drones today? And can 10 centimeter, resolution meet the requirement of what they're trying to solve today? And that's kind of the sweet spot for us and some of those examples.
Cool. Yeah, I guess one last mention from Arthur, before we close out with our final segment. Anything you want to just kind of highlight in terms of some key areas that you all are really excited about investing into for this next 12, 24 months?
Yeah, so I did mention AI ML for operations. It is really challenging to be able to fly these proliferated architectures without having a huge amount of manpower on the ground. So how can you take advantage of tools to automate that? I think that's great, but I mean, really my biggest strategic push right now is SpaceWERX is just one piece of the puzzle. So our alignment to the greater, so our $500 million a year to the $40 billion a year for the Space Force budget to, almost $1 trillion a year on the Department of Defense, and also aligning that across agencies like NASA, the intelligence community, and ultimately giving that demand signal to industry and private capital. I'm really just looking, how do we scale? How do we bring all that together so that we can have these game-changing capabilities in the hands of the warfighter? That's my big push, is that alignment across the government, with what we can do so that we can get after the right things.
Yeah, excited to keep tracking it and, just pumped for, those types of opportunities to create opportunity for the commercial sector to get involved. So kudos to what you all are doing. Kudos to for what you guys are doing, building. And then, we'll transition to our final segment here. This is a quick kind of, rapid fire Q&A. Since Arthur, this is your first go at this, Topher, you're a repeat. I'm going to start with you, Topher, and then Mike, you close with Arthur. So, Arthur, you can take notes, but they're not going to really be the same questions though. Topher, you should be a veteran at this point. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. If Albedo were an animal, what animal would it be?
Ooh, an eagle.
Solid. What's your favorite part of the culture at Albedo?
Say the speed and the focus on hard problems.
What kind of technologist continues to thrive at Albedo?
Someone that understands physics and understands the problem, but wants to continue to innovate in the right way. Not too much upfront, but with the incremental ability to continue to push the limits.
What kind of tech roles do you think you're anticipating over the next 6 to 12 months?
Definitely engineers focused on scaling up production and doing things and, taking things from a 0 to 1 to a 1 to 10 kind of approach. More vertical integration. So a lot of engineers focused additionally on design and not just taking something that we didn't have vertical before, but going vertical, but also improving and upgrading the existing systems. So I'd say across everything, software, hardware, all sorts of disciplines.
Nice. What's the first job you ever had?
First real job was at Lockheed Martin in Sunnyvale, working on large remote sensing satellites for the U.S. government. Had a great boss that taught me everything I know, and he is actually our lead architect here. So it's cool for that to come full circle.
I was waiting for like Domino's or something.
The first of that job, gosh, I think a lifeguard. I think it was a lifeguard.
Lifeguard. All right, there we go. What's your favorite space themed movie or TV show?
Ooh, Interstellar is so good. I think that's my top.
Nice. What's one of the most valuable pieces of advice that you've ever been given as a founder?
Ooh, depends on the phase. We learned so much in Y Combinator. We did YC, myself and my two co-founders, and we got so much out of that. And I the advice that kind of really was high leverage at the beginning of that was from Eric Mijakovsky. We were talking about doing this like hardware demo kind of thing for demo day. And he was like, no, just go talk to customers, like understand their problems, understand, this market, and just focus on that fully for the first 2 months. And that was super valuable for us.
That's cool. What's your favorite snack to pair along with your daily Topo Chico?
Ooh, maybe RX bars.
Oh, nice. First car?
Toyota Camry. Named Wanda.
And last question, what was your dream job as a kid?
It was undercover cop.
That's amazing.
Great. That's great. I like to think he had like a spy kit and everything. Good stuff. All right, Mike, you go ahead and close it out with Arthur, and then we'll wrap.
All right, sounds good. Here we go. Explain SpaceWERX to me as if I were a 5-year-old.
We invest into ideas and we make them happen.
Nice. What cultural value do you impress most upon your team?
To take risk. Don't be afraid to take risk. If we don't take risk, who will?
Nice. What types of people thrive at SpaceWERX?
Folks that are dynamic and have an agile mindset and are always pushing the boundaries.
What tech roles are you guys trying to fill?
I'd say people who understand the broad space for technology and the broad mission areas for Space Force so that we can align our portfolios.
What military leadership skills have been most invaluable to you?
Servant leadership, always seeing what you can do for the folks on your team. And really, it's the team that makes it possible, not you as a leader.
What was your favorite childhood meal growing up?
Ooh, so what's funny about this, I'd say chocolate. I love chocolate, but I was allergic to it, so I would get high. It's still my favorite.
Still your favorite? Cool. What charity?
I don't get hives anymore. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. You just ate through it?
Yeah, I just ate through it somehow. Yeah.
Nice. What charity or cause is near and dear to you?
I'd say just the environment. My spouse and I, Michelle, we love animals and going into nature. And I think just preserving that for future generations is important.
Awesome. Teed up this next one nicely. What's your favorite pet?
Dog. So we have, we've had dogs throughout our lives, and we love those little guys. They're always so happy and really your best friends.
Nice. Who's your favorite Disney character?
Oh my gosh, that is hard. There's
the tough ones.
I do love Aladdin, just because it came from rags and went to riches, but more for like just from his character's perspective, how he grew.
Nice. All right, last one. If you were handed a box of everything you've ever lost, what would be the first thing you'd look for?
Oh, I'd say my keys and pretty much anything that I don't put in the same spot.
Good stuff. Yeah, that was a deep one, Mike. The deep closer. Awesome. All right. Well, Topher, Arthur, thank you guys both for bringing your insights to the conversation today, and pushing the envelope here to modernize the Department of Defense and also areas of space tech. So super helpful for our listeners, and appreciate you guys joining us on the pod.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.